Today is Wednesday, June 30th, 2021. Coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, Bill Cosby is at home as we speak after the Pennsylvania Supreme Court freed him from prison, citing a deal struck with a previous prosecutor that said he was not to be charged. We're going to break it all down with our stellar legal panel, including Monique Presley, who was a formerly lawyer for Bill Cosby. Also, we'll be joined by Tanya Fields of the Black Feminist Project. Sexual assault advocates are outraged at today's decision. And comedian Joe Torre has long stood by his Omega Psi Phi fraternity brother. He will join us as well. And so, folks, it's a jam-packed show. It is time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the biz, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time. And it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
Folks, breaking news out of Pennsylvania. Well, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court today threw out the conviction of comedian Bill Cosby. 3 years ago, he was convicted of assault, and he was sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison. Well, they ruled today that the decision to prosecute him was wrong. Why? Because he previously, with another prosecutor, agreed not to pursue criminal charges against him in exchange for him speaking in a civil deposition, in a civil trial. What that meant was that in that particular civil deposition, he could not declare his Fifth Amendment rights to self-incrimination. The court ruled today that as a result of that agreement not to prosecute him, which then caused him to give up those rights, that was wrong, and that the new prosecutor, who campaigned specifically that he would prosecute Bill Cosby, he should have honored that previous commitment. It was a shocking turn of events. Not only the decision comes down today, Bill Cosby this afternoon was freed from prison, and then outside of his home there in Pennsylvania, his representative Andrew Wyatt and attorneys and others spoke about today's developments. So, folks, if we have that video, please let me know so we can go ahead and play that. If not, let me know when that video is ready. What I want to do right now is I want to bring up our panel. First and foremost, Monique Presley, crisis manager and lawyer, A. Scott Bolden, of course, a former head of the National Bar Association Political Action Committee. I want to talk with them first. Monique, I'll start with you. Was today's decision by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturning lower court's ruling, was it a shock to you? You previously represented Bill Cosby in this particular case. You were one of several lawyers, but your thoughts on today's decision by the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court?
They did the right thing. And what I said on December 31st, 2015 is the same thing that I have to say today, and that the Supreme Court ultimately said. When a prosecutor makes a promise and a defendant or potential defendant relies on the promise to his own detriment, that cannot stand. The original prosecutor, made a promise, declined to prosecute, and induced the testimony of Mr. Cosby in a civil case because of that assurance. But for that, he would have had the opportunity, and certainly the lawyers then would have advised him to plead the fifth. He would have remained silent because there was the potential out there for a criminal charge in that case. Bruce Castor's decision eliminated that as a possibility, supposedly. And then you fast forward 12 years to a new prosecutor who somehow decides that if the person who's sitting in the seat of government wants to do something different because the times call for something different, or because it's an election season and he wants to win, then he doesn't have to honor what a prior prosecutor promised and what a potential defendant relied upon. It was absurd from the outset and should not have occurred. And so what the Supreme Court said about it is that that cannot happen, that the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has to adhere to the promises of its officers where its citizens have relied on those promises. And that's what we saw today.
There's been a lot of people who have been commenting, a lot of people who have been saying this is an outrage, that Bill Cosby should not have been free from prison. Scott Bolden, this was a 79-page decision rendered by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Your judgment on today's decision. Scott, we have no audio, so please unmute yourself.
Sorry. It was the law, and the Supreme Court, in a 79-page decision, which means they were very intentional about this, said, regardless of what you think about Bill Cosby and the 5 or 6 women or the dozens of women who he allegedly was wrongfully acted with, the bottom line is they tricked him into giving up his Fifth Amendment and then tried him years later that violated his due process rights. I agree with Monique. It's pretty standard fare. I have a Fifth Amendment right. If I cut a deal to give it up with a prosecutor, another prosecutor 12 years later can't come up and say, I'm not going to honor that deal. The other thing to remember, Roland, about this is that the Supreme Court could have taken a slightly different position. I believe the other issue pending before the court, vis-a-vis whether the probative value of those other women being led into the second trial outweighed the prejudicial effect. I think the court would have ruled that it was too prejudicial. And had they ruled on that second issue, first issue was the violation of the due process. Had they ruled on the second issue versus the first issue, they could have sent it back down to be retried. But instead, they intentionally said, we're going to deal with the due process piece, because if he violated his due process rights and you tricked him into giving up his Fifth Amendment and you prosecuted him, then the other women and how the trial went are moot and don't really matter. And so they chose to attack this case like that, so that, one, they vacated the judgment, cannot be retried, and then they discharged him. Case over, bottom line. And he's at home at 79 years old, and there are a lot of people who disagree with the court's decision, but the law doesn't serve one side or the other. It just serves the law and the judicial system, and this was the right thing to do. It was the right legal decision to make, and the rest of it on politics and perceptions, people can have their opinions, but this was the right call by the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania.
Well, first, Cosby is 83, so I'm sure he would appreciate you shaving 4 years off of his age there, Scott.
He's cute too.
He's 83 years old. But Monique, to Scott's point about how the law works regardless of who you are, the critics say Bill Cosby got a sweetheart deal by this prosecutor, Bruce Castor, choosing not to pursue charges. In reading the 79-page document from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, they laid out where he stated that he did not believe that he could actually get a conviction because of inconsistencies in Andrea Constant's testimony, also no physical evidence and the time gap between it, and that he gave many statements where he also said that he wanted to be some measure of justice, which as a result of this decision required Bill Cosby to have to answer all questions during this civil case. There were 4 depositions he sat for during the civil case, and then at one point he did answer some questions. They went to the court, and the court said, yes, as a result of the previous agreement, you have to answer these questions. And there are a lot of people out there who are saying that this decision vindicated Bill Cosby, or that Bill Cosby was declared innocent. That's actually not what this decision rendered actually says, correct?
No, it doesn't have to say that. It says that he shouldn't be charged in the first place. It says wash it all away as if the trial never happened. Somebody in this country is still innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. You can't be proven guilty on something you never should have been charged with in the first place. So people can say in language whatever they want, whatever way they want, but I see a lot of people, even legal folks, calling this a technicality. To me, again, absurd. How is someone inducing you to waive essentially your Fifth Amendment right to not be incriminated against, and that be called a technicality when it is the direct cause of things that happen later? So anyone who doesn't think that they have a liberty interest at stake will answer questions that any lawyer would first say, don't do it, if they thought that there was any possibility of a trial. So what I think about now is that people who understand the law and respect it should replace Mr. Cosby with any given defendant. Replace him with your son, with your husband, with your brother. We try one case at a time, and the obligation in the justice system is to do it when it's right to do it. So imagine your family member being made a promise that they relied on by the government. That promise is supposed to stand. We need justice to apply the same for every single person in every single case, and that's to administer it fairly.
To that particular point there, Scott, as I went through this ruling, this 79-page ruling, that was the one thing that the court kept coming back to. They kept coming back to saying the fact that Bruce Castor, as a prosecutor, carries a lot of power, a lot of weight, and that his decision had to be respected. That once once a defendant gets this word, and even though there were claims that, well, it was not actually written down or it wasn't actually formalized, they concluded that as an agent of the court, if you will, that carries a lot of weight when he says we are not going to prosecute you criminally. Therefore, as a part of this agreement, you must testify civilly. What they're saying is that, look, in other words, what Monique said, that frankly, Bill Cosby did not have that agreement. He's not speaking truthfully or answering all questions in the civil. So if Bill Cosby didn't get that agreement, we actually would not have any testimony of him actually speaking on the record about quaaludes and sex and drinks, things along those lines.
And it was an interesting deal. I mean, we've been at this a long time, Monique and I. I've never seen a prosecutor do this type of deal. But they did the deal, and the court recognized that. But remember why Castor did it this way. He could not prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. He could not, and he announced he couldn't, and that he was going to do this deal where he was going to allow to say he will never be prosecuted or not prosecuted. And in exchange for that, he will give civil testimony, and ultimately that case settled for $3 or $4 million. It didn't have to be in writing. I'm an officer of the court. Castor was an officer of the Pennsylvania State Court and the prosecutor. That does carry weight. A deal's a deal, as I've been saying on social media, and you can't unwind the deal because you don't like the discretion of that prosecutor. And so here it's even more egregious because in exchange for him giving up his Fifth Amendment, he agreed to testify. And that's what Castor wanted because there was going to be a civil settlement. The prosecutors cut deals like this all the time vis-a-vis, they know a civil case is out there. Here, Castor structured this deal to get him to give up his Fifth Amendment. He gave it up because Castor knew he couldn't prosecute him criminally because what? There wasn't enough evidence. So on the first trial, there wasn't enough evidence. And then the second trial, they brought in these other prior bad acts, allegedly, these other women. They let in 5 or 6, and then you get the conviction. That's not due process. That's not fundamental fairness. And that's just a bad jury verdict based on what's underlying all of this.
And there were a lot of people, obviously, Monique, who were also critical of the fact that that deposition that was taken, he sat for four different sessions. A deposition was leaked or inadvertently exposed publicly, which then put it in the public record. If that doesn't happen, then publicly we don't have even that in the trial, correct?
I don't know. Or maybe I know things I can't say. But here's my point.
First of all, for anybody who's paying attention, even though she is formerly Bill Cosby's attorney, the attorney-client privilege requirement still stands. So that's why there are some things she cannot talk about. Go ahead.
Right. And other things that I just will not talk about because I think that there just is an obligation of confidentiality. So anything that I'm commenting is publicly available. It's things I said publicly then, things that were in trial, or things that others have already commented on publicly. To Scott's point, I think it's really important that this Supreme Court had the option to reverse and remand, had the option on the other issue, and I think they would have. I think that the decision by the judge in one trial to not let in that testimony, and then when it hangs, comes back in the second trial and basically opens a barnyard door and says, "Come one, come all, tell your story." That made the difference in the trial, and the Supreme Court likely would have found that, but they decided instead, no. We are taking it all the way to the beginning, before the first trial, when there were charges on December 30th, 2015. That is the decision that was wrong. And so it's not a decision by Castor that was wrong in making the deal. Prosecutors have all the discretion in the world. It was the decision by Steele to not honor it that was violative of Mr. Cosby's rights. If you just think about the way prosecutors come up with plea agreements and then the court ratifies those agreements, what if the prosecutor 10 years later decides the day before your little brother is supposed to get out of prison on a deal that was 10 out of a 10 to 20 possibility? We shouldn't have offered that. That's too low. We think he did some other things. We can't get him for the other things, so we're going to stack on more time here. Are you kidding me? No, that cannot be the way that our justice system works. And I am thankful that the Supreme Court sent that message very clearly today.
And for the people who don't understand, the last line in the court's opinion is that accordingly, we do not address Cosby's other issue. That other issue they're talking about is the judge allowing other women to testify, speaking to his character. That was one of the complaints the Cosby attorneys made, that their testimony should not have been allowed in. People also got to remember, the first Cosby trial ended in a mistrial. He was convicted in the second trial. It was in the second trial when the judge allowed those women to actually testify. And so you had lots of different things that were going on here. There have been a number of people who have been responding. We've seen lots of folks on social media commenting. Victims' rights advocates have been speaking as well, weighing in. I want to pull up right now. Tanya Fields, she joins us right now with the Black Feminist Project. Tanya, glad to have you on the show. Just want to get your reaction to today's developments of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court regarding the release of Bill Cosby from prison after serving 3 years of what was supposed to be a 3 to upwards of 10 years sentence.
You know, I'm certainly not a legal expert. I am a survivor of both domestic and sexual assault. I work closely with folks in this community who deal with, who are support to survivors. And I think we are talking right now, Monique, and I'm sorry, I forget the other gentleman's name. Scott. Hi, Scott. Are talking very astutely and brilliantly about, the legal process and due process. And I don't have much to offer in the way of that. What it brings up for me is that we are ironically talking about justice, but we're talking about justice for someone who has admitted that they engaged in sexual acts with people who could not consent. That is by very definition rape. And that we have a justice system that continually does not side on the side of those survivors and those victims. And I think that in all of this discussion, that is what is getting lost. That for me is where we need to have deeper conversations, right? I think that it's really interesting that Monique is talking about people's little brothers, right? And people's fathers. And we have seen a justice system that continually has failed Black men, right? And we talk about that. But as soon as we talk about a justice system that is failing women, right, now we want to invoke those images. That doesn't really seem fair. We know that this justice system is not, in fact, a justice system that works for folks. And there are certain folks who continually get maligned. Bill Cosby is not somebody's little brother. He's not someone's, poor father in a poor neighborhood. This is a man who had a lot of influence. This is a man who had a lot of money. And he used that money and influence to rape women. And now he used that money and influence to be able to use the legal system in such a way that it would benefit him. And I think that we need to call a thing. And that's the thing that's happening right now. And so for me, I feel very sorry for the victims. I feel very sorry for those of us who have been victims and who are survivors and who are thinking about whether or not we can disclose. And they are terrified because we know that there's a justice system that continues to be on the side of patriarchal oppressive systems for femmes and femme presenting and women and girls who are victimized.
You mentioned in terms of what we're talking about here, there's a reason why I separate the issues. First, for the purpose of the audience, we have to explain to the audience exactly legally what happened.
Right.
So there have been a lot of people. So for instance, there have been a lot of people on social media who have been saying that Bill Cosby was exonerated. Well, that's actually not the ruling. They actually laid out specifically what the ruling was. The decision of the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court today was not that he did it, that he didn't do it. What they ruled today was that there should not have been a trial as a result of that previous agreement with the prosecutors. And so now the reality is he still testified in a civil deposition in terms of his relationship with Andrea Constand and other women and what he did, giving Benadryl, also in terms of answer question when it comes to Quaaludes. That's actually on the record. Monique, want to give you an opportunity to respond there, because there's been just so many different feelings. There have been people saying, how dare people celebrate this decision because of the legal ruling by the court. There have been others who say it's bad, others who say law should be changed, all of these different things here. And again, naturally, because people are very emotional about this issue, allegations of sexual assault, we can go down the line. It's really causing a lot of conflicted feelings among people, men and women.
Yes. Well, Roland, I'm here today as a legal analyst, not as an advocate for any client or a spokesperson for any person. So I don't really feel led to run down the litany of the million things I've already said. I don't take any of them back, but I don't feel the need to say them again. What I will say is that women matter in the justice system. Men matter in the justice system. Black women and Black men are mistreated in higher numbers in the justice system. They are wrongfully convicted more. They are abused more. Black women's cases are not taken as seriously. We are viewed differently than our white counterparts. All of those things are no more or less true because the Supreme Court today decided that in order for our government to function, when prosecutors make a promise, they have to keep it. That is what this is about. This is about something that should not have happened. So as emotional as people may be, and as emotional as people are going to be, the fact of the matter is, from the person who is innocent and has never done a single thing wrong to the person in the United States of America, at least, the person who blows up buildings. They both are under the same justice system, and they are supposed to have the same rights, and they are supposed to be treated in the same manner, regardless of color, creed, sex, wealth. Doesn't matter about any of it. This is about what our government is supposed to do. So I believe that all of those other issues are valid. I have factual disagreements, but I think that there is a factual record out there that supports itself. But what today is important is that we know that whether you are old or young or black or white, at least in Pennsylvania with that Supreme Court, they will hold their very powerful prosecutors to the same standard, no matter how much the times change and no matter how much the characters change.
Tanya, then Scott.
What exactly am I responding to here?
well, again, that what you're dealing with here is, again, distinctions. You're dealing with legal distinctions. You're dealing with distinctions of others who say you must always believe and support women. And then you have those who say Cosby was exonerated. Others who say no, he was not. I mean, that's.
He was not exonerated. I mean, we are talking about legal process here, right? That's the conversation that Monique and Scott are having, right? And that I'm being brought into. And much like Monique just said, I am not, I will concede that I am not an expert in those things. So I will not speak to that. But what I can tell you is that from my layperson's understanding of what happened here, it is. And she can talk about all the factual stuff she wants. There's factual stuff that victims' rights and survivors' rights can lay out as well. We know that the justice system, and I'm very uncomfortable even talking about that, right? Especially when we talk about the intersections, and we cannot talk about these things without talking about the intersections. We can talk about what the law is supposed to do, and we can talk about what the law actually does do, right? And we know, yes, that women do not disclose. We know that you look at the intersection of that, Black women do not disclose, Black trans women do not disclose, gay men do not, disclose a lot of the times, and that when they do, that they are treated with certain disparities, right? What I am merely speaking to here is that what I am seeing is a failing of the law on the side of the victims in the criminal case, right? Because from what I can see, what Castor did previously was that he made a deal, and he made a deal so that there would be some compensation in the civil space. Maybe he did not anticipate that this would come here, right? Because when you look at it from that perspective, I do agree with Scott. I do agree with Monique. You cannot make that kind of deal as an officer of the law and then come back 12 years later and some new person comes here and says, we're going to do something different. You are all acting on behalf of the state. And so when you look at it from that perspective, then a decision was made that a lot of people from a legal perspective believe was the right decision. What I'm saying is a survivor. What I'm saying is someone who works in a community of people who have been victimized, right, at higher rates, and then do not disclose and do not have access. And when they do disclose, are treated unfairly or not believed. We don't believe women, right? We don't. And we have a law, legal system that reflects that. And so again, my point is, and it's the point I'm going to continually make, is that this was a failing for the victims in this case. And there is enough blame to go around, right? One can argue that Castor should have never made that deal. And then somebody else will argue that he made the deal so that some person in the civil case could get some compensation, right? We could argue that after that deal was made, that yes, that this case, this could have been, the conviction could have been vacated, but then there should have been a new trial, right? And certainly people have made that. One of the judges who was in dissent said that, yes, we should have a new trial, but we should not be vacating this and making it so that it didn't happen at all. So even from the legal standpoint, there is some dissension on what the outcome should have been once it was decided that the deal that was previously made should not have brought the disposition into the criminal case, that was the wrong legal decision. That's what we're talking about. Right now, we are not talking about how the survivors are getting justice. And so that is why I am here, to make sure that we keep that at the forefront of our minds, that we do, in fact, need to work on this legal system. We need to have a legal system that does look at how do we have transformative and rehabilitative justice for those who are the victims of sexual assault and sexual violence.
Scott, but in this case here, Scott, the jury did believe the women, and all of the courts, when there was appeal, it went through, and we went to the state Supreme Court. And so to the point that Tanya makes, when you talk about justice, when you talk about justice for these women, how do we reconcile that with this decision by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court?
Let me talk directly to Tanya, because as a former sex crimes prosecutor, I know I can never empathize with you because I'm not a survivor, but I can certainly sympathize with you. This hurts. This is disappointing to all the survivors and all the advocates out there. But let me give you a perspective that hopefully I don't get too legal, because I want you to honor this decision and respect it. You can feel the way you want. But the reason I think you've got to honor and folks in your position and respect this decision is because the irony of this conversation is, when we talk about due process rights, when we talk about hearsay violations and prior bad actors coming in, you're right, the criminal justice system doesn't work. And it usually works against us, people that look like us, right? And so today, the reason I think you have to find a way to respect and honor this Supreme Court decision, not because it's a technicality, but the law is imperfect, yes, but it worked today because it said, I don't care who you are, you've got to respect the due process rights. A deal is a deal, and you cannot renege on a deal simply because of new leadership. Otherwise, you violate the fundamental fairness and the goals and objectives and principles of the very criminal justice system that our system is based upon. And it is imperfect, but today it worked, and you want that system to work if you're ever going to get justice for victims and get justice for people that look like us. You've got to continue to believe it's the best system we have, but it is highly imperfect. You're going to get results like this, but if you honor those principles of the criminal justice system, we're going to make it better, because we want it to work for Black folks, white folks, victims, as well as defendants, because we've all bought into a social contract that we're going to accept rule of law, and we're going to accept how the Supreme Courts of this country implement it. We may not always like it, but it's really the best thing we've got. And I hope you can find a way to respect and honor this, because hopefully this will make a difference in the lives of Black people and all people who come before the criminal justice system.
Roland, there was something else I wanted to point out, if it's okay.
I think that's a yes.
Okay, it was silence. I was asking permission. I'm trying to be on my best behavior today. The other thing that people seem to be ignoring is that this judge, who also had a great deal of discretion, could have sent Mr. Cosby home pending appeal, knowing that there was going to be an immediate appeal, and knowing that a couple of the decisions, including these